Pedro Tavares.
And I'm Tyler Hansen.
This is MRED Radio. We got to sit down with Ted again for episode 2 and talk a little further about some of his projects.
And Ted takes us chronologically from Del Mar Terrace into Little Italy. Goes through some of the multifamily projects like the formation of the Lind Block, the collaboration with a bunch of other architects in San Diego, and on into the planning for what would have been the campus for Woodbury University in Barrio Logan, and about how that kind of unraveled. And yeah, very interesting stories altogether.
Hope you guys enjoy it.
You know, a quick summary again, the practice begins in 74, 75. We do houses in Del Mar until the crash, really. I built a house for myself. But then in the crash of 81, when the interest rates went to 20%, the architecture work just dried up. And I built a house. I had a mortgage payment, had a son, had a family. Everything was cool. I had tons of clients. Did we talk about how Andy Nelson, everybody, and my dad's connections hooked me up with all that residential work when I was a kid?
Yeah.
So I think we did talk about that sort of stuff. So anyway, I'd been doing all of that and built the house, and then the crash happens in 81. The interest rates really did go to 20%. And they were that way for a couple of years. So the world was dead. As you can imagine, there wasn't a single thing going on. And there I was, after having built the house in 76, so it was about 4 or 5 years later, and couldn't make the mortgage payment. There I was in trouble. And it was like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to sit here and put a sign outside, architect for hire, cheap. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. In the olden days, that used to work because the blue wall was right there at the entrance to Del Mar Terrace. So when anybody drove in to buy a lot, they had to drive by it. So I'd always have, my architecture sign on the house there. And that worked pretty good along with Andy connecting it up. But by 1981, it was a mess. Everything was a real problem. And when you have money problems, it kind of broke up my marriage, frankly. And so we didn't have any money.
That was because you had no work, right?
Huh?
That was because you had no work, not because you had a 20% interest rate loan.
No, I didn't have any loans like that.
Yeah.
Nobody else was hiring because they weren't going to build anything with the rates where they were. So my rate was probably a really great rate, something like 14%.
A bargain,
House.
14%. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was really good. In those days, 12, 14, anywhere in there, you're going kicking it. Anyway, wow. most of my early career, those were the rates we were dealing with. And it made a huge difference, as you can imagine. But that's why everything's so damn expensive now. The rates are low, right? Yep. So it might be a good thing to have the rates high and keep those prices down for beginners like I was in development. But by that time, I was sitting there in the house, couldn't make the mortgage payment. I was probably, I don't know, I was starting to project. So what I did is I went and got a hard money loan against the house. I got 20 grand and bought a lot down the hill, a cheaper lot, it was $100,000 lot down the hill. And it was the first go home lot. And at the one time I bought it, Tamby, Zach's mom, and I were just trying to figure out how to make everything work. And I designed probably 2 or 3 houses for the family in that place. And just things just got worse and worse. But anyway, before long, I'd moved out of the house. The house was on the market. I was living in Sereno Valley in my office in a wonderful Russell Forrester building. I don't know if you know Sereno Valley, the older part of Sereno Valley, there's these beautiful wedge, sloped roof, little wedge buildings that, who had done those? Russell Forrester had done them, I think. Yeah. Russell Forrester had done them, and the developer had been the great benefactor of the La Jolla Museum. Anyway, it was a wonderful little development project, and I had one of these little boxes, and they were 12 by 22, these boxes. So that was 250 square feet, as I recall. And I had 2 of them. They were arranged like jacks, all in different directions and pointing in different ways, but they were, they basically had a 12-foot high end, and they had about a 16-foot high end. So across the 24-foot length, they went up at almost 45 degrees or something. Not 45, but it looks that way when you're on the ground, but it looked really steep. So there were these wonderful little spaces that were 12 by 22. So I'd be sitting there in the thing. Zach and I had just built myself a little bunk bed over there. Dad's living over there in the office. Okay, so And so I'm sitting in the little office and going, man, damn, this little house, this little space right here, I am living in it. And guess what? It looks like plenty of room to me. So it's like 12 to 22 with a 12-foot one end and 12 and about, no, it's 8 feet on one end, maybe 14 or 15 on the other end. But these are beautiful little jacks, little cute little jacks turned in all different directions. I had 2 of them, one facing south, one facing north. So they made a bow in the middle, like that, the 2 of them. They kind of went against each other.
It's kind of like Brett's project now, right? In
Mhm.
Carlsbad.
What?
Kind of like Brett's seaside project in Carlsbad right now.
Well, the project in Carlsbad that Brett did is really a Sea Ranch project, isn't it? And I
Yeah,
thought that
Sea
was
Ranch
really
is what I meant to
interesting to
say.
see Sea Ranch. Yeah, the Russell Forster stuff are white, and they're Russell Forster. You wouldn't ever say he was ever a Sea Ranch type architect, but it did have a shed roof. It did have the big shed roofs going in all different directions, but I wouldn't call it a Charles Moore derivative at all. It was Russell Forster modernism. Really, it was modern. The one end of the box was a complete window wall. In fact, both ends of the box were complete window walls. I don't know where the shear was in that thing.
They didn't have shear back then,
Earthquake.
Ted.
What?
They didn't have shear back then.
They didn't have earthquakes.
necessary.
This little building would have just wiggled. It wouldn't have mattered much. But they're all this one story. They were sitting there on the ground. But I love this little building. And I'd sit there and I'd draw pictures. I still remember sitting there and just going like drawing little pictures and saying, oh, I can have a little kitchen there and put your bed here and all this, and I built a little bed bunk. Like I said, Zach and I helped build me a bunk. And I was going, this is perfectly fine. I bet I can build one of these for $10,000. One of these, half of my office, which I felt would be fine. And I had a friend, Peter Sprague, who's a really fantastic guitar player, a real A-list guitar player. And he was a monk, and he'd spend 6 to 8 hours a day playing guitar. And my brother and I really admired him. He was also a really good surfer. And we were going like, man, that is the life. He plays guitar all day, surfs all day, goes and does gigs at night. Anyway, we thought he was our greatest hero, Peter Sprague. He still surfs and plays guitar regularly. But anyway, Peter lived in this little shack down at the bottom of Del Mar Terrace that was about 10 by 12 with about a 12-foot ceiling. It was like a little shack. And he just sat in there like a little monk practicing all day. And Gus Thorburn, who was the UCSD architect at the time, and was a big Del Mar Terrace architect, done a bunch of nice houses up in the cliffs and stuff. Russell Forster, what was I saying? I was talking about
You're half an office.
Huh?
You're half an office.
The office. Yeah, I was talking about the office, but I had something I had to say there. Oh, I forgot what it was. But anyway, I'll just jump to the fact that the office was a good size, good shape. And Peter Sprague lived in a little tiny thing that Gus Thorburn designed, the architect. That's why I bounced off to Gus. And anyway, Peter said, I got $10,000. And I said, I've got an $80,000 mortgage. I just put $20,000 on this lot, and I'll be able to keep this property for at least, I don't know, a year if you can start helping me with the mortgage. So Peter agreed to put in $400 of the $800. I said, okay, great. And you got a $10,000 bill. Well, finally, I did sell the house, and it ended up paying the mortgage off, and I actually walked with $10,000. So I had $10,000. So we had two $10,000 bills. And we had an $800 month mortgage payment, which was the simplest little performer you could ever imagine. You build two $10,000 boxes and rent them for $400 each. I didn't know about soft costs or any such thing. I didn't ever even get into it. In fact, soft costs were almost nothing, of course, because you could go get a permit in 7, 8 days. It wasn't a big deal. It went down the counter. Mike Stepner would be down there, and I'd go, "Hey, Mike, what's going on?" And he'd go, "Bingo, stamp, bingo." It wasn't that, Mike. If you see this, I know you weren't that easy. But anyway, but he was a big friendly guy that was behind the counter at the time at the building department, which was a fun place to go. We'd drive from Del Mar downtown, find this seedy place with sailors roaming the street and prostitutes and drug addicts everywhere. And I go, God, I'm going to drive downtown and get a permit. It was always kind of scary to leave Del Mar. But I'd come downtown and there'd be Stepner down there helping out. And anyway, I had real success and a lot of friends in the planning department and the building department. Joe Flynn was instrumental. He was a zoning administrator at the time. And when I began doing the go homes, I'm just going, how am I going to do this? Okay, I'll just, build 2 little boxes. And Joe Flynn sent me an article about the state Supreme Court thing of the Rosebird, where they had, in a challenge to a bunch of students renting a house at Cal Poly, San Luis, neighbors had complained and said they're not a family. They can't have 12 of them in that house, making parties, doing all the horrible things that happen at mini dorms, right?
Mhm.
Which is kind of development that we got connected with unintentionally. At some point, we were called mini dorms, but we certainly were not mini dorms. A mini dorm was a normal house, was not designed for sharing, and a go home was a house designed to share. And the primary distance was there was enough parking. We had like a parking lot for 6 people. And we had all the little bedrooms, quote bedrooms, had doors. And they did all, in fact, share a kitchen. And after Peter put up 10 and I had 10 left over, we built a roof between the 2 boxes. So you could sort of stand in there and wave your arms around. All we had to do was build the roof part between the 2 boxes, and you could stand between them, and I would try to sell the space. I'd be like, hey, you can have this
It's in
space.
here.
Can you picture it? It's from here to here, all the way up to there. And and I managed to sell another one to Peter, who then rented it to support his. So he rented it for more than $400, paid me another $400 for that one, made a couple $100 on top. Now he was there for $200. I was living there for nothing. Well, $400. No, because I was getting $400 for Peter's first one. And then I figured, heck, I'm good. Now that the space that's left is only 12 feet by 20 feet. I think that's Zach's go home. So we found some windows and stuck on both ends of the 2 sides of that. So I think I built that box for probably $2,500. And that became the 4th go home in that first little box of buildings. And a few years later, the thing that is actually interesting to talk about, and it's sort of weird in a way to talk about your family situation, but the thing that was really cool, and one of the driving forces behind the go home in the beginning, was that Tammy had a boyfriend, and the boyfriend lived with her, and I was basically, it was a happy split up. And so basically I would just be wanting to come, and I just go in the door and say hi to Zach. I didn't have to go, hey, Tammy, I'm coming over in a bit, and I'm going to be hanging out with you guys while I see Zach. No, he had his own house. So I always thought to myself, this is the perfect a model for a house for a couple splitting up. Anyway, so it was really good, and I could see all of that. And for long, I said, what the heck? I can build 2 more boxes on this. I found another friend, Rob O'Callahan, who had, at this point, it was a few years later, $15,000. I'd managed somehow to collect $15,000 and built another. No, we had a different deal. Rob had $30,000, and I offered all the labor up. So we got 1 more each. So I got 1 for me. So now I'm there with Tammy, her boyfriend, Zach, Peter Sprague's old Tom Sloan, who was my draftsman that helped me build it, who now rented Peter Sprague's go home. So this idea that it was an abstract, we'll make 6 house spaces, and no, it wasn't. It was a very personal, connected thing that we made in that initial go home. But of course, when we finished it, well, man, this is a good deal, because by the time I had it, I really realized, well, I have a free house for Zach and Tammy. And basically Peter's paying the mortgage for it. And we're just sitting there free and clear. And I was like, man, this is way better than when I had this gigantic $1,100 mortgage up at the Blue Wall that drove me like I'm going to go crazy and made us go nuts, basically. So now all of a sudden it was like, my God, this is terrific. I have my housing taken care of. It's just, I still had to find taxes and insurance and all of that. But basically, Peter paid the mortgage on the whole thing. And then when Rob came into it, I had a free one for myself too, because Rob's ended up paying for mine. He had $30,000. He put in and I got $400 a month income from Rob, but I think it was $500 by then. So he gave me $500. So I had $500 income. I had the free house for Tammy and Zach. And I was going, this is just terrific. I'm saved. Well, anyway, about around that time, when I was building the second house, The giant class of Cal Poly people graduated. That's Eric Naslin, Robin Brisbois, Jim Brown, Dennis Hollingsworth, and another few other Jim Gates, a few other luminaries that came out of that interesting class of architecture. But Robin arrived as I was building the Via Donata addition for myself and Rob Callahan, the 5th and 6th unit, and said, yeah. And I said, wait, can I work? And I said, well, I don't have any money, but you can be a carpenter. And so he was willing and paid him really to help me build the house. And then his friends all showed up, and so we started to put together a partnership to build the second go home, which was the Via Foligno go home, which was a couple blocks away. And the idea was I needed a music room because when I'd left the Blue Wall, we didn't have a place to play anymore. So it'd been a few years we were playing in Sereno Valley and wasn't working out very well. But anyway, so we built Via Foligno, built the office there, and the partners were the office. So it was a really a very ideal kind of like all these, the owners of the house are all getting up in the morning, going to work, doing architecture, doing the Smith and Others architecture thing. So we had Jim Brown living there with Dale Newcomb, who was the woman that came and joined the group as the secretary, and Robin Brisbois, myself, and Robin's brother Reed was there also because he had put up money for one of the go homes. And this particular house, we didn't build in little pieces. We made it as one house. It was a 3,000 square foot house with 6 500 square foot spaces in it. I think they were called family room, living room, library, master bedroom, bedroom number 1, same kind of thing.
Unplanned.
Yeah, well, they basically just were. You look at it without titles on it and go, that's a house. And we had to borrow money because it was no longer going to be a cash deal to do this thing. It was a few years later. By now it's 1986, and so we we basically borrowed money from a normal bank by the first stealth building, which was the Foligno. The Via Donata building, we had just gone out like young crazies and told the world, here's what we're doing, and everybody loved us. And there's all architecture magazine articles, and it did a whole lot for my career. By the time the Via Foligno building was built, the neighbors decided they hated us, and it became an entirely different thing. This goddamn guy was going to put these little hippie houses all over Del Mar Terrace, and because we had also by that time, we had finished Via Foligno, gotten it published. Very naively, like here we are happily doing the go home thing, and pictures of us all sitting on the front yard in the local papers and the local rags and stuff, and and of course the neighbors, well, what the hell are they doing there? We don't like this. And did I ever tell you the story about Peter Navarro? I must have. It seems like I spoke.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Did we cover it in the last interview? But the Peter Navarro story is.
You can't have forgotten the Peter Navarro story, but I have a feeling I spoke about it before somehow. Even though we're doing this chronologically, I shouldn't have yet. Peter Navarro was running for mayor when we were doing the third go home, the Asperia go home. I think I told you about this. Yeah, Pedro, did you already got this material?
I don't know if it made it in the last episode. Okay. Like so much got lost.
Yeah,
we might have trimmed it. It's the story is excellent because of its how it relates to the Trump era.
Right. Well, you remember, so maybe I should go ahead and tell it again here.
Let's go.
But so anyway, Peter Navarro was running for mayor of San Diego, and he was running as the stop LA in San Diego, stop the sprawl, stop the building, stop everything, stop building. And he would do his Mariel thing. He'd come and have the cameras meet him on the beach, and he'd swim out in the ocean and come in with his shirt off and be Mr. Suntan, and show up on the beach and go, I'm against LA, I'm against all of this. And about that time, the Via Foligno Go Home was published, and the Via Asperia Go Home was under construction. And he said, aha, perfect for my campaign to rally up all the conservative idiots in Del Mar Terrace who don't like the fact these hippies are living down here. And I'll be able to make an issue about affordable housing in your neighborhood, basically. So so anyway, there was he just doesn't understand the affordable housing is just exactly what the precise plan for Del Mar Terrace calls for, and it calls for exactly on the lots we're building. So it was kind of ridiculous that but he just used it. We know now how ridiculous campaigns are. They're not about anything. But he's like, I got a hook here. Everybody's wondering what that big house. And the funny thing about the third house is that there was a German dance hall that was built in 1912 on Del Mar Terrace, a big, beautiful building, big square box of the building. And it used to have a giant neon sign on the front of it that said dance. And it was just a big, dumb German gable, low pitched gable. And some developer had bought and it, cut it all up, made it bumpy and put porches on it and bumped it all up because, architects can't handle a big flat building. So I was kind of pissed off. I'm going like, well, in the history, when they look back at Del Mar Terrace, this site that we're doing the house on is a few blocks from the German dance hall. And you can't see the German dance hall anymore, but if the historians were to look at a picture of Del Mar Terrace in 1912, they would see the German dance hall. And now in 1987, by this time, we rebuilt the German dance hall. And so what we did, we had a 30-foot height limit. So we did the Disneyland thing and we played with scale and decided to make it look like a 4-story building. Because, so, Disneyland, you walk down Main Street and everything's 3/4 size.
Yeah, it's the forced perspective on all that. Yeah.
You must really realize that, Tyler. You probably have to.
I love it.
But the looks of the facades and all, they look really big. So anyway, this big flat-faced facade that was Via Speria just riled everybody. Oh my God. And then it was made to look bigger than it was. So it was really asking for trouble, but I didn't realize at the time. But anyway, he took photographs of it, used it on all his campaign literature, saying, here comes Los Angeles, here comes affordable housing in your neighborhood. And they showed up and big time. He almost won. But anyway, I was in the Del Mar community group and I tried to say, hey, let's have a meeting so he understands what it is. It's not what he's worried about. It's actually, and I probably haven't talked too much about, but the Go Homes were more than just the shared housing thing. They were also a defense against the intrusion of apartment buildings into the single family neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so there basically had been all these lots that were right behind 7-Eleven and little restaurants all along Carmel Valley Road, dumpsters and trash cans and everything that makes the adjacent single family lot not valuable. It's a depressed value, is adjacent to the commercial zone. And so what the developers and what the people had started going like, well, if you're next to a commercial zone, by right, you can upzone your single family lot to a multifamily lot. So that had happened about 3 times in the terrace already over the last 10 years. And everybody in the terrace was real aware of that. And in fact, when I was active in the Torrey Pines community group, drawing maps as a consultant back in the day when I was naive and thought that humans were wonderful. I'm sorry. Before I bet Navarro and company. But anyway, I just, I don't know what I was going to say again, but it was crazy times. And I just, anyway, when I'm doing the presentation, Del Mar and Navarro and about 20 protesters come into the back of the room where I'm doing the slideshow. And a carousel slide, clink, clink, and I'd have the picture of the marsh and how the fact I'm building a single family residence on the edge eliminates the ability to upzone beyond me because you're no longer adjacent. You no longer have the right to upzone. Mm-hmm. And in fact, 30 years later, there isn't any more apartments that went into Del Mar Terrace. The Go Homes pretty well held the line from Via Speria, Via Foligno, Via Donata, and then another one on Via Borgia, on Via Aprilia, and years later I did another one on Borgia. But anyway, they really are on a string and they're on every block and they're all right on that commercial residential zone. And I think they were successful. So a big part of what I wanted to show Peter Navarro and make sure the Torrey Pines group remembered, because they had written the legislation that became the Torrey Pines plan with me together, thought they were all allies. And in fact, we were building affordable housing on the line between the commercial and residential. And that it was actually helping the neighborhood. Don't worry, we're the opposite. We are with you. We don't want the neighborhood to have encroachments of apartments either. But in the middle of the slideshow, Peter Navarro just starts chanting in the back of the room. They start chanting. They are so going, no, stop Lily, no. I know in the thing I tried to explain to Peter Navarro was an economic theory that sprawl is always sucked towards the depressed property. And I gave, for example,
like it flows downhill or something.
It's similar to that in a way, but say take an example of the agricultural edge of the town where the tracks are going out further and further. And there's a point where the tracks are ruining the agricultural property because they can no longer use pesticides so close to the tracks. And so next thing you know, that agricultural property becomes residential property, and the sprawl is sucked towards the depressed adjacent property. In the case of the outside of the town, the greener, it's the agricultural, but in the commercial zone, it's the same thing. The depressed property is a residential piece behind the commercial piece, and it sucks the upzoning into the neighborhood. So in fact, the go homes had those two main intentions. They were urban planning, and they were they were also affordable housing. And anyway, but in the middle of the thing, he screamed and had a lecture. And I remember in the middle of the slideshow, I just stopped my carousel and said, I'm not going to continue. I walked out of the Torrey Pines group meeting right in the middle of the protest, never to return. Never to return, to go underground, to go stealth, and says, I'm the heck with these people. And then it wasn't long after that, via Asperia, we had another go home where we bought property that we built, that we sold at that time, and called it the Gone Home. It was right behind the Via Asperia go home, because we'd actually had a great big piece that they were going to turn into a shopping center. And we partnered with the landowner there to build go homes instead of the shopping center, which he'd actually put together 28,000 square feet. He'd already moved a house on part of it. And so we built the Asperia house on the bottom, and then we made 2 more lots behind it where we're going to build more go homes. And we did an 8-unit go home, and we actually decided to sell it as a regular house. One of the arguments that Peter Navarro had is these go homes are going to diminish your property values. So we were really proud that the 8-bedroom, 8-bathroom house has sold for more than any house ever in Del Mar Terrace history. So we're going, you're nuts. Anyway, but that was it. By then we're running out of lots along the Maginot Line there. And all we could do was be jealous of Rob Quigley, who had just built the Beaumont building in Little Italy. And Rob was downtown, and he was writing the ordinance with Mike Stepner. Really, they were writing the postmodern ordinance, which became the, you better not have parking lots in front of your buildings. You got to have a street facade. You got to have openings every certain number of feet. And also that you only needed 1 parking space per unit or something like that. So they did everything that was necessary in those ordinances to make this happen. And in addition, Rob had put in the ordinance, the requirement that this Center City Redevelopment Agency conduct a RFP to select an architect to do a demonstration block. And it actually said in the planning, because of Rob, and that the demonstration block will be multiple architects to maintain the proper scale. So it's in the ordinance. So Kathy and I finished 9th and Beach, which was the one she found on a Sunday morning when we said, let's get the heck out of Del Mar. You could buy a lot downtown for $150,000, same price as Del Mar. You could build a tall building with no setbacks and no NIMBYs. And so we're going, what the heck with Del Mar, we're out of here. And so we moved to 9th and Beach, the project we called the Richmond Poorman building, because Kathy wanted to build row houses. And there weren't row houses. Jonathan was building row houses down on 7 on Kettner at the same time as Kathy was building the row houses there. And Kathy's were a traditional row house, garage on the bottom, 3-story building above it. And it was, and I think, you always say this, but we didn't know of any other row houses in town. So it was kind of a funny thing where you kind of go like, oh, this is an East Coast kind of a thing to build a row house. And Jonathan was doing the same thing, but with a big parking garage underneath it at 7 on Kettner. And then later on the Lind project, he did the kind of row houses Kathy and I had done, except more efficient without an extra story and the whole staircases and the hell go with those. So anyway, Richmond Poorman was funny because these row houses were big. And I remember arguing with Kathy at the time and going like that, Cortez Hill isn't ready for these, and no one's going to be able to rent these and pay for these. And so the go homes were really successful in the early years, and now the row houses are hugely successful. And the go homes barely make any money in that building.
But that's the way it was in that arrangement. Kathy did the row home side of it, and you did a go home side of it. Right?
That's right.
So we split the building down the middle, and she did the rich man side of it, and you did the poor man side of it. The poor man side of it, I like to liken it to a beehive. It's like a little nest of people up in that building. It's amazing.
It's a nest, and it's really funny. And the nest of people are the nuttiest bunch of young people you've ever seen, because they are the nuttiest bunch of people. They're not quite the surfer gang that was downtown. They're really a little more hip downtown people. They're a little different people than were the beachy people that had the ones up there.
You know what they call
Anyway,
your row
they
homes
did
now, Ted?
what?
You know what they call like your go homes now? Or what people kind of refer to. Yeah, that kind
The
of
Del Mar
strategy.
go homes.
Well, not
What?
those, but just the kind of like spirit you had at that time now is it's heavily sort of promoted as house hacking, you know, like
House
getting
hacking.
control, yeah, getting control of your like finances by, you know, splitting houses up and getting, you know, roommates when you otherwise might not want to, and sharing kitchens and things like that. That's
Well, this was the articles that Joe Flynn sent me when I started to talk about that Supreme Court case where they had, you know, ruled the families didn't have to be blood related.
yeah.
Mhm.
And that whole slice up has been going on by a lot of people. And of course, Teddy Cruz's exhibit in the La Jolla Museum mix show a while back had that beautiful model of a big suburban house sliced into pieces.
Mhm.
And then of course SB9 is Teddy Cruz's slice those big fucking suburban houses into pieces. And you know, it basically that idea is a solid thick thing that's been around for a while, and then slicing them into go homes is a whole step further. Because we immediately, of course, with SB9 go, okay, we got two houses we can slice into go homes.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's continued to be a viable way to, once you get to the number, and basically you guys probably given this a bit of a go. The ADU ordinance, I'm really worried it's not going to produce any affordable housing, for crying out loud. I'm having a hell of a time making a performer work anywhere near the downtown San Diego. And, you know, and away from it either, because the rents go down so quickly. So if you try to, you get in that single ring, maybe you guys have been, the first ring of, you know, North Park, South Park, Golden Hill, Hillcrest, Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, you just are, you're hard pressed to make any money there with the ADA unit. You know, even when we go home the heck out of it, Fernando Bacar, the really great carpenter, Woodbury graduate that helped me build Boca, he became an intern in the intern program this year. And,
Oh, cool.
and for the first 3 or 4 months of the program, we worked on a project on his house as a ADU idea, how much can you push it? And we basically had about a 10 unit property that we got out of it. And it still was tough and tight and
Wow.
didn't feel good and almost didn't feel like something you wanted to do. Just didn't feel right.
Mm.
And anyway, he didn't have to go ahead and do it because he had a partner on the house. And, you know, I'm starting to try to figure out partnership agreements, who's doing all the work, who should own everything. And he says, oh, you know, Fernando's going, I didn't really even make any of this money. I just blinked and I owned it. And this guy's my buddy and I don't want to do partnership agreements like that. And so I'm not going to do the big addition in the back. I'll buy another one and do that later. But anyway, we did look quite carefully. And again, Fernando can build at half price, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every single buddy on that job was a buddy in the construction trades that he now owes a favor to. But the building basically was nearly free. And he was built without a permit because he tore the entire roof off of it. You know, Tyler, you might have seen that house up there on Ocean View. It's got an incredible view of the city.
You know, I've only lightly familiar with this. I'd like to know more about it.
Yeah, it was a crummy tract house on the alley, way up on the hill. The thing that's neat about it, it's got a beautiful classic San Diego rolled boulder wall in the front.
Oh, yeah.
And big high wall. It's right on the top of that view, that street, Ocean View, which runs through Logan Heights. Anyway, he didn't make a piece of architecture, but he did tear the entire roof off of that house and reshape it to put a clear story in it, and tore the thing down to the studs, built it all back together in 3 months. Enough to make you want to scream, right? I still don't have a permit for my freaking cafe at a Boca after 8 months in Planchette. 8 months in Planchette. I'm not kidding. Anyway.
So Ted, you touched a bit on
Huh?
you touched a bit on partnership with Fernando. How were the partnerships set up for your go homes on Del Mar Terrace when you started this out?
We actually wrote a partnership agreement because I was asking Peter to put up 10 grand.
Yeah.
Deal. It's a lot of money. And and we actually had a lawyer write a partnership agreement, and it was basically just an agreement that said what we do, how you come up with a price, someone's going to be bought out, all that kind of stuff. I did buy out Peter later, just as per the agreement. And, I own that whole go home now, having bought Rob O'Callahan out also. So we actually own that whole go home.
Some of those homes had, I don't know, 4 or 5 of you in ownership.
Yeah, Via Felino had 5 of us. Maybe more. Let's see, 1. We should have had 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, there was 5. Oh, I know. We left one of the spaces as our office. When we were there, we used the big downstairs go home as an office, and then we had the 5 people living there, and they were all partners. And we had, it was a very short agreement. I still have them laying around here. Every once in a while, I bring them in and I would turn them in. It's, hey, look at this partnership agreement when we'd be doing partnership class at MRED. It was a really naive little partnership agreement, but it covered all the bases. It was not an LLC. It was just a straight partnership. And it basically solved every problem that we had going forward, bringing a new member in, what would happen, blah, 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 all that stuff.
This money you collected from everyone, you didn't, like, you went in and you got financing with that money, or that money paid for the construction?
No, we got down payments from everybody, and we went in and got a 70% loan.
You did. So
Build a
then,
house.
and then how would you take title with 5 of you?
We took title as, I can't remember if it's joint tenants or tenants in
Tenants in
common.
common.
The successor doesn't get it. If I died, Robin and Jim and his brother didn't get my share. Zach did. So anyway, it was, I think, that's tenants in common, or is that joint tenants? I never know. I think it's
Never
tenants
remember.
I think we were tenants in common. And, I had an attorney write it up for the first go home. And then, of course, I just doctored that agreement for the following go homes. Just used it again. Just switched out the names. And those have all worked well. And in fact, when Peter Navarro actually shut down the third go home while it was under construction, and one of the partners in that deal was Dale Newcomb, who was not a partner, but was the office manager at Smith and Others, who lived at Via Felino also. And she wanted to go home in the next project, and she had one. And, we got shut down. The building department told us we can't build anymore, while Navarro had a friend down at the building department. We were a month from completion. We were finished drywall, cabinets in place, ready for final inspection. Peter Navarro shows up and they shut us down for approximately 4 months. And during those 4 months, I had a little bit of a problem with Dale Newcomb, because she said, I don't think I need to pay my share of the mortgage during the 4 months you screwed up. And so that partnership, I had to buy her out. But we had it all in the agreement. So it was really easy. Here you go, buy you out, you're gone. And I'm going, great, I got a new one and I can sell it for more now. Anyway, but the partnership agreements have been valuable and have kept everybody somewhat friendly, even though Dale Newcomb got a little out, I'll have to say. I remember when she quit one day, she was there with her boyfriend. She says, I quit, I'm not gonna help you anymore. I says, I want my money back on that go home. You guys have been pulling my leg. It's not legal. How come they shut us down? What the heck is going on? And so she was all unhappy. And I remember saying, well, Dale, can you finish the letter I need to get out to the thing before you quit? and her boyfriend laughed. I remember it was really funny. But anyway, it was all okay. And but it was the worst situation that happened with the go homes, I'll have to say. But Via Felino, again, was a great time. And we all lived and worked there. It really was the classic crazy idea that you're all going to live and work in the same house. And it was actually pretty fun. I remember we had one giant Thanksgiving dinner where we had all of the people's family and relatives there. We must have had 30 people around a giant dining room table. And we had so much fun in that place. We had really had a great time. We had a big music room in it. There's always a lot of music, but it was just a wonderful, fun place to live, really good. Via Speria, after Peter Navarro lost and his political power was gone, they just said, oh, we were just kidding. You can close now. You can get your final inspection now. So we basically did. And basically then it was all fine. And the people that ended up living in that, a few years later now, started being my son and his buddies, because we ended up buying out Dale and Larry, a friend of hers. So we had 2 units that were just ours after we'd gotten the loan. And so we were able to move Zach and Tom Zinzer, and then went on to become the 3 Mile Pilot and all that stuff. We're all living there at the Asperia, but that's the only one I never lived in. Robin never lived in it, I don't think. No, he never lived in it. We ended up renting that house the whole time, the whole thing, and stayed at the Afolino. And then we had the few from the partners that were out that we could rent. But we rented them all separately. We all had our unit that we rented. We owned the building in the same, in this case, there were 6 partners.
So then you go downtown, you build another go home at 9th and Beach. Kathy builds an amazing house next door.
Yeah, she builds the row houses.
And when did you first hear of a young kid in town named Jonathan Siegel? Was it around that time?
At the same time. So when we're building those row houses, Jonathan approached Kathy, and I believe this is how we met, to help him with his interiors, his color work, materials, carpets, finishes. And so Kathy and Wendy and little Matthew and tiny Brittany.
This is Jonathan's family.
Little family there. And Kathy was the consultant that basically was helping Jonathan with his early work. Not to the degree she helps me with my architecture, but as an interior designer, materials consultant kind of thing.
And that was 7 on Kettner. That was the one.
7 on Kettner, which Jonathan built at the same time that we built 9th and Beach, I think in the exact same year. And so we were like, hey, we're friends. We're both downtown. We're builders, you know. And so that's how I got to know Jonathan. And it's, you know, you guys know, Jonathan has been central to the whole MRED program. But there we are at 9th and Beach, you know, and what happens then? I start teaching at New School. No work again. We finished 9th and Beach. There's another goddamn recession, 1992, whatever. We get done. I move downtown. Here I go. There's $150,000 lots all over the place down here. I'm going to build them everywhere, right? And nothing. There was nothing. I couldn't make a deal come together to save my life. I was down to nearly no money. The go home at 9th and Beach was making money, but it wasn't hand over foot. You know, I was making more money than I ever had just from apartments. I still had a bunch of go homes and the 9th and Beach project. So I was a little bit independent, and I started figuring I was teaching, and I did a lot of a kind of speculative work. That's when I was working on the drawings and made the postcards of San Diego, where I superimposed Barcelona on San Diego, San Diego's grid. And I was trying to propose that nobody should be allowed to build in the middle of their block. Everyone should do a perimeter block, and we'll be as good as Barcelona. And because, you know, they're almost the same size blocks. Barcelona's with 100 meters square, 300 by 200. So it's almost the same block. So I was just always into trying, can't we make Barcelona? And so I actually spent a lot of time with that, made postcards, long kind of histories, and illustrated kind of academic things. I was like, okay, I've got a little income. I can just hang. I'm working at New School. I'm downtown here. Everything's cool. And I want to get a gig together, but there isn't anything. And next thing you know, it's 1995. And what had I done between then? Seems like I built a house for Kim McConnell at UCSB. And that's took a bunch of time right through that period. And we did another couple of houses, I think, Kathy and I, through that period, but we didn't do any development. And it was 1995, and Quigley's multi-developer RFP comes up. Quigley has set the stage. So Jonathan invite me in to be the 3rd member of the team, and I immediately say, well, I'm not big enough. I'm going to split my 3rd into 3, and I'm going to do the 3 projects, half each with Jim Brown, Lloyd Russell, and Robin Brisbois. So I did those 3 buildings with.
And this was the RFP for the Lind block, which was the block in Little Italy, the Little Italy neighborhood development. Is that what it was? Is that what the acronym was?
That's what Lind stands for. And what it was an RFP, a request for proposals by the redevelopment agency. They had over years had consolidated the block, and there was still 3 5,000 square foot pieces that they didn't own. And when Quigley was not a developer, right? He had a client, Mike Galasso, Jonathan, of course, was a developer, but Galasso wanted us to wanted to make his building bigger than the land we already had. And he made the decision that instead of our project just being on the part that redevelopment could have the option, maybe we won't buy that piece. He managed to say, we're going to take part of your piece. So our project got smaller, but it's a good thing that he did that, because the redevelopment agency really didn't like us. It turned out that one of the redevelopment, Pam Hamilton, who was a bigwig at CCDC, one of the high up people, and was best friends with Avi Wolfsheimer, who was Peter Navarro's buddy. And they knew me from the Del Mar days. They knew me from the Go Homes. And Pam was so pissed off that we won the competition. She was my adversary through the whole RFP process after we won it. And she would come in a meeting and she said, you have to promise not to do Go Homes. I'm saying, no, I already won this competition with Go Homes, and that's what I'm going to do. And I was just basically belligerent. And so there was no way they were going to close the piece that I had without, if Galasso hadn't needed a piece of it for his own house, which is the one that ended up being Kathy's, the one that Kathy designed.
Got it.
Part of the deal of having him get a piece of my deal was Kathy got to be the architect for that piece. And so she got to do that one last Lynn project for Mike Galasso. That, again, that whole section where Harbor Marine is, and where Kathy's building is, and where Merrimack is, would not have been included in the RFP if Galasso had not done that thing. I remember at the time I made these Civil War battle maps. I don't know if I've ever shown you those guys, those things, but you know how battle maps are so cool. They say, oh, you know, General Hooker's here, and then Lee comes up around the corner and gets his flank and all this stuff. So I made this whole map about how Galasso had attacked, and we had to flank Jonathan and do all this kind of stuff. And at the exhibit we did at, where was it? It was at UCSD. Lloyd and I had portraits of ourselves where we put on the beards and the hats, and so that we were like the generals. And I had a really funny presentation of that whole thing. It shows the battle happening and the land getting taken and who ended up with the property and everything. And the story was always about, that's why it's a sincere, real thing, because it really is a competition between these architects. It's not we didn't all get together buddy and do the buildings. In fact, every time anybody did anything, they would be pressing against the other guy's property. It's like, can't you close that window? I need an opening on my property line. I want to move the property. I want to move the property line over here. By the time we'd moved the property lines on that property around so much, Pam Hamilton, the redevelopment, she, where they're pulling their hair out. They're pulling their hair out. They're going, oh my God, this has become so complicated, because they had to do all the parcel maps and they had to carry the property right through that whole period. You could never have done Lynn without them. And they were stuck creating this incredible easement document, which was two or 3 inches thick. And Pam Hamilton hated it when Lynn got finished, and it was well received by, academics and the architectural press. The redevelopment agency said, we'll never do anything like that again. You want one developer when you do a project, we can't deal with these. And, we turned into 7 by the time you count the 4 of us and then Jonathan. And so they were really fed up with the whole thing. But it was, I remember one time Jonathan was just as hard on Pam Hamilton as I was. And it was good that he was, because together we were pretty tough. But I remember Jonathan made Pam Hamilton cry at one point. I remember sitting in the thing, and Jonathan was being so tough and ungiving on the thing that she actually broke down. And it was so embarrassing. We're all sitting there going, oh my God. And then you go back, and the funny thing was, God, Jonathan, you made Pam cry. That's really tough. But anyway, he got his whatever he was pushing, and we were able to finally, she said, absolutely not, crossed her arms in front of her, said, you cannot do a go home period. And I went to my lender, and I had my lender write a letter to her that said, we won't fund this project unless it's a go home. I brought that in and dropped it in front of Pam Hamilton one day, and she just went, oh. Sorry, checkmate. And it was over. And so, that's how that played out. And it was actually really interesting. But it was too bad that Lynn got a bit of a bloody nose through the whole process, because I think it is a good model for how to do things, not the dividing and the easements, but multiple developers. I mean, these bigger projects really don't have a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's completely true. And I look at Mike's
I don't
own building. Good God, what incredibly big, amazingly good, well done building, right? So
Mhm.
you can't ever say that anything about anybody that way. But that there really was a small character that people you think of when they think of little villages, or the little villages that postmodernists are dreaming of having or building in a middle density situation, where the smaller buildings do in fact express a different kind of business than a corporation. And in today's realization that we live in a corporate world and we're pawns of the corporate world, the old expression where a big builder, a big man, a big builder in the community would build a building with a 50-foot frontage, and it would be a big building, and it was a powerful thing, and he was a big deal as a small businessman in that community, where now there's no such thing, right? They're almost non-existent,
Well, even think of the
except for
differences.
nuts like us, right?
Well, even think of the differences now in the financial institutions. Imagine having an institution say that you can only do a go home. Like, it's unimaginable. Ted, is that bank even still around? I mean, I think the consolidations that happened
That was
after
the
the
Rancho
financial
Santa Fe Bank. They're all consolidated. There are no small banks like that. You're absolutely right, Tyler. They're all gone. Here's an interesting story about a BOPA. Quick sideline on this. We got the loan from Pacific Commerce Bank, a wonderful woman that Hector introduced us to, Esperanza, and not Spalding, Esperanza, can't remember her name. But anyway, but she was wonderful, and she was our person. And then later on, that was bought by First Choice Bank. And then we had to extend the loan at some point. Esperanza was still with us, and we had to extend the loan because it would take too long to build it, and et cetera, et cetera. So we got a year extension, and basically didn't refinanced it, got an extension. Bank had changed to another name. And then and then 6 months later, the bank was bought by First Enterprise Bank. And at the same time, before I knew that was happening, I was getting my permanent financing from Enterprise Bank to pay off First Choice. So this whole time I'm negotiating with Esperanza, and they're offering me a loan too. And I'm kind of going like, well, I don't feel good about that. You guys were to give me an extension. I'm going to go get a perm and pay you off. I want to come back and do more business with you. I don't want to, like Mr. Guy, they got extended forever. And so I went and got a new loan with First Enterprise, and then Enterprise like buys them out. So I ended up with the same pool of owners that lent me the money after 3 successive loans. And it's that same story as the Enterprise is buying up all the little tiny banks, and for long Enterprise will get bought up by the big 4 or whatever. And it's just absurd. The whole thing is really absurd, the way they own everything.
Yeah. And
they really do. I mean, they own everything, don't they?
Yeah. And it just makes harder and harder to try and find the things that fit in the gaps. I think the Lind block is a perfect example of orchestrating all of the gaps for those things to for architecture to happen. And you just the financial model lined up with it. And yeah, CCDC had a hard time with it. But ultimately it came out to a beautiful project. And I'm sure the easements are like the size of a dictionary, but it's totally invisible when you walk
Nobody
through.
knows they're there, right?
Then nobody even sees it. You just walk right through those pretty little courtyards, and you don't even notice it. So it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, the redevelopment agency required us to put gates to all those openings.
Yeah,
and we just told them we're not gonna. We got the final inspection. We're not putting them in. What are you gonna do about it? They also told Jim Brown to take off that beautiful hangar door he's got on the front of it, or paint it. And Jim Brown stood right in front of that with his arms closed and said, "I'm not touching it. That patina is why it's good." And we were just mean to CCDC because we'd been treated. If we won the competition, I mean, Galasso had tried to fire Kathy at one point, and we'd actually had to go into hearings at the redevelopment agency and say, this team won this deal. Being a diverse team, I'm sorry, we have a woman architect on board here. You can't fire the woman architect now. This was a public process. And he had already hired Mark Feldman to do Kathy's building. And we went in there and said, forget it. You're not gonna. And we went to the CCD people. They're going like every time they turned around, there was Smith and Company being a pain in the ass. But anyway, they backed down, let Kathy finish the building, even though Mark had messed up part of it by then. But she got to finish it. And he was oddly enough, Mark Feldman was um, my paid employee when I built the Blue Wall years and years ago.
No, no
Anyway,
kidding. Small town.
and yeah, and when I first moved to Sereno Valley to have an office there, Mark's the one that moved me out of my living room because he said, "You got to go down and make a real practice, Ted. Come on." And so we went down, he found the Sereno Valley buildings, and I moved into them. Next thing you know, there was a drum set in there, and Mark is going like, "This is not what I had in mind." I have in mind a regular company like Tucker Satter Bennett, and he went, that's what he was trying to do, and he went on to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's interesting that he was brought in there a while, and he was an old friend, and it was just like we had to go there and just say, "No, this guy is not allowed to be in the team." And so that saved Kathy's building there, which was good.
So Ted, from 9th and Beach through Lindblock, were you still teaching at New School?
So while I'm building the Lindblock at Merrimack, I need a little bit. I'm the chair. I'm the design chair at New School at this time, and I'm beginning just feel my oats. We'd gotten all the best architects in town were faculty at that point. We had Teddy Cruz and Eric Naslin, Todd and Catherine, and Jim Brown, and everybody that had won an award, period, there. And I felt like, you guys are running this thing like a money-making operation, because I got my nose in the books. I'm going, fuck, these guys are cleaning up on these students, and there's not in sandpaper in the shop. There's no fucking sandpaper in the shop. There's no blades on the equipment. They're going to hurt themselves. Everything was like, come on, you guys are milking this thing. The salaries were way low. I could add them up. I don't know. I'm kind of going like, okay, you got a mortgage and you got what? Where's the other 50% going? Anyway, I became a bit of a pain in the ass. I'm saying, well, you need to raise the salaries of the faculty, and you do all this. And so I had assembled that illustrious group of faculty into the conference room at New School. It would be about 1996. And I'd said, we demand that we get a raise or we're all going to quit. And the head of the New School looked over at us all and he said, "You're all fired." Wow. So I got fired right then along with everybody else. And so that shows you how much power the good designers in town have.
But I'll be honest, I thought it was more noble than that. I thought that the walkout from New School was in regards to being a little more, what's the word? A little more discerning about who they let into New School, about acceptance of students.
Oh, I think that was naive, wasn't it? If anybody ever said that, I mean, did Woodbury do much different? Yeah, I wouldn't say that about the MRED program. We're very selective, but Woodbury in general, let anybody in. So did New School. You had to have a mom with the money. But that was not what it was about. It was really about, you're not paying us enough. This is a for-profit institute. It's not like Woodbury, a nonprofit, but you learn right away the salaries make a nonprofit the same thing to have with Woodbury.
Yeah.
And
but anyway, Woodbury was actually good compared to them, because I would go in there and say, here's what the salary is going to be. We're going to pay everybody this much money. The budget adds up to this. We're sending 40% north. You guys are doing fine. Mm-hmm. And that worked for the first years until a new president guy, David, showed up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the budget wasn't mine. It was just, we couldn't spend that much, and you can't have that faculty, and you got to have 10 students to run it. So anyway, that's what happened there. Yeah.
MRED didn't immediately come out of, you ran an MRED type studio at New School?
No, I didn't.
No, it was just design.
I had go homes and stuff. I told, housing studios but it was nothing but a performer involved.
You had a few proteges come through there though, right? You taught Brett. Who else did you teach there?
Brett went through there at the time. Who else would I think of that was at New School? Well, Debbie Karnak, who I did the house with. A good friend of Adam French, a wonderful saxophone player, and son of Tamby's 30-year boyfriend. Son. I actually got him free tuition there at New School.
Mhm.
Anyway, and then told him, get the hell out of here. You want to go to SciArc, and got him into SciArc. Because that was about the time I'm going, this place sucks, right? I think they can't even buy a saw blade for the shop. You gotta be kidding me. You know, anyway.
And then how'd that transition into Woodbury coming down to San Diego?
Well, that was pretty interesting. So the whole faculty at Woodbury, well, a few years before Woodbury came, Dennis Hollingsworth, which is an incredibly part of that class from Cal Poly. He's a wonderful artist. If you ever want to look up Dennis Hollingsworth, he became quite a well-known artist. But he was an architect in the beginning. And Dennis Hollingsworth taught at Woodbury University. And I wanted to do an MRED program. And I was going to Dennis, and I was sniffing around and going like, how do you know what I do? He introduced me to Geraldine Forbes, who was the chair at Woodbury at the time. And I just went up there and said, hey, I want to do an MRED program. And she said, here's what you do. And she gave me a performa. She basically said, make a performa and propose it. How much you're going to pay everybody? What's it going to do? What's your curriculum going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. So I made a curriculum, gave it to Geraldine, and it took about a year to come through in a way where they're going, yeah, maybe we want to do this. But about that time, it starts to be 1998. We're finishing Merrimack, and the Naval Training Center comes up. And Woodbury's looking to expand.
Mhm.
They're talking to me just to do an isolated program. But they were planning on expanding, and the word was out in town, and all the faculty at New School was aware. And there was a group led by Jim Engelke there, that he was the dean at New School at the time, that tried to take over the reins of Woodbury when they came to town. And so I went to the first couple of meetings of that, and then immediately said, I'm out of this group. These guys are not going to get the positions. It was 2 or 3 people I don't need to mention. Jim Engelke at the top, that you're still like, well, you're not going to be teaching at Woodbury. It's going to be the good place. And I wouldn't say that, but I sort of dropped out of that whole thing at the time. And we pretty much organized with Catherine and Geraldine Forbes. I'm trying to think, a number of people suggested faculty, but generally it was the faculty that started Woodbury over there, the same group.
But at that point, it had transitioned.
When I was design chair, that had been gotten there. It was basically them, and we went over to the Naval Training Center. We had that really nice free building over there, and got the program going. I think 3 or 4 years we were at Naval Training Center before they rented the building on 8th, and we ran the MRED program out of the building on 8th for a while. I never did MRED at Naval Training Center because it still took a few more years to get MRED to happen. They got all involved in moving here, and then it was like, we don't have a master's program too. Let's just worry about it. So the master's program was postponed for a few years as the school moved. But the initial contact, I believe, was on doing the master's program. Yeah, so that was that, and I remember Stepner stayed at New School, and I think he saw an opportunity to kind of lead over there, and did. But the rest of us went to Woodbury, and it was it was all great until Teddy leaves and goes to UCSD. Kind of took the heart out of the squad that made me believe we could actually build the university over there when we bought all that property on Logan.
Do you want to explain that story? There's this whole big plan for a campus, like a self-built campus that was just fantastic.
Well, it was a nutty dream, Tyler, and I think it would have been really fun. The idea was that you'd make an architecture school that moved. It's almost like archigram or something. The building moves or something, but the building wouldn't move. The school would move, and as it moved, it would leave urbanism. It would build and move and build and move and build and move. And the idea was each faculty member would build their studio with some housing on it, flexible space on the bottom that would be a studio, housing on the top. And that over the years, you would get it working in one area, but it could expand and move and be somewhere else and not be a centralized campus. There's a lot of discussion about turning the public space of Logan Avenue into the campus space.
Mhm.
And
Because the whole group of you purchased the property along that cul-de-sac.
we
there
all
in the
bought
Logan
it
Center.
together. We bought
Yeah.
one property.
Like
We
it
bought
wasn't just a
all.
dream. You guys were inches away from starting this.
What happened is Teddy Cruz's wife, Kate, had found the little building next to Todd and Catherine's place, the one that Rob Quigley has now,
Yeah.
and said, I can have my office in there. And then so he said, Teddy, you want to help do that? So Teddy and I were going to do it. And basically we looked and we found, well, these guys own the other side of the street plus 2 lots next to us. The family housing owned all that property. And oh my God, they also own the piece up on Sampson that Hector, Joe, and Robin had. So all of a sudden this became really bigger. So then we invited everybody else in, Quigley, Grondona, the group, Todd and Catherine, Joe Cordell, Robin Brisbois, Hector, Lloyd Russell, Teddy Cruz, and myself. And I arranged a purchase. We purchased the whole thing. And I would send bills to all those guys for the first 3 or 4 years saying you need to, send your piece of the mortgage and everything. And, I sort of kept all the property together, and it seemed like it was going to work. But one of the things that made it fall apart, which is kind of interesting, is that the Woodbury North, they didn't like the idea of a campus on the street, and understood probably correctly that there'd have to be a security guard in the entrance to every one of these buildings. So they saw that as sort of ridiculous. So I think that was part of the reason it failed, but also what happened is that the presidency changed. And the guy that was into it, that we'd met with, it was all gung ho. Yeah, this would be great. We're going to be in Barrio Logan. That's the place the school's got to be, et cetera. He changed. He left, and another guy came. Project was dropped. And now we'd already bought it though. And so I'm going, hey, okay, we're going to slice it all up. We're just going to, and we didn't have to slice it because all the lots were already parcels except for the one Lloyd, Teddy, and I had, which was too small to break up. So everybody got their piece. I went in and I made an evaluation like I was an appraiser and say, Rob's, yours is more expensive. Catherine's, yours is bigger. Yours is littler. Yours has frontage. Yours, and make all these decisions on what the value are of each relative value of the different buildings, where everybody went fine. And we split them up. Just split the whole deal up, paid off the bank. Everybody got their own loans and bought their own pieces. But then it left Lloyd, Teddy, and I stuck with it. On the best piece, but the most difficult piece, with the contamination, the most liable to have problems with the political situation. And it was too small, and it wasn't big enough for the 3 of us until we closed the property. So it was actually valued by me as the least valuable for those reasons. And it was true, it was the least valuable. I mean, it's way less, way smaller than all the other ones.
Yeah, it is, skinny little thing, hard to build on.
Very hard to build on, right up against the freeway. We discovered a gas tank underneath it.
Right.
It was like, oh my God, this one's trouble.
You spent a lot of time and energy like going for a street vacation there too, right?
Yeah, I went ahead and we worked on a scheme that, Teddy was pretty well absent. Lloyd and I worked on a scheme, and then Lloyd pretty well got busy doing Center Street. And so it's pretty much I was pressing the thing forward, and I couldn't get anybody to work on it. Instead of, Lloyd and I always worked together so well because we'd get up in the morning at 9th and Beach, 8, we'd work till 5, and we didn't keep track of hours, didn't do anything. Everything was 50-50. We built Merrimack the same way, built Essex the same way. So all of a sudden, Lloyd was no longer in the office with me. He was doing other stuff. We didn't know who was, there wasn't the, hey, we're all working on it together. Teddy's, where the heck he is. He's somewhere in Europe. And so it was basically became like, I couldn't move anything forward. I couldn't, I got it all the way and submitted. We got Vernon, Frank, to draw up the map and do all that kind of stuff. The map was there. We had it down to approval. When I sold the property, all it was necessary was me to say, okay, I don't want half of that parking lot to be private. I understand you guys can't make a curb that will let me do that. So basically, parking lot out of Logan Avenue, double loaded 90-degree parking lot. And it basically, you can't do it according to the building department. Make one half of the part that fronted our property be private property and have that access. And I tried rolled curbs and everything else and signs and everything. They kept saying no. But the whole map itself had been approved. Just the idea that I wanted it privatized right there was not going to fly. And so when I sold the property to Spencer, I was kind of going like, you should close this thing quick. And all you got to do to go do it is just go down there and tell them that you don't mind if that's public.
Mhm.
And do it. And he decided, oh, no, I'm going to. And years later now, he's in shit. Politics have changed dramatically. I don't think he'll get that street closure anymore.
Huh.
Anyway, I'm I'm kind of glad I got out, frankly. But it was disappointing because it was a long effort. We had a wonderful fun time working on it.
Mhm.
But it was also interesting in that it kind of awakened me again to the idea that we don't all really get along. You know, at Lind, we'd been all happily working together because we just sliced it up. And Kathy and I worked together. We cut in half and we did it, right? But all of a sudden, it wasn't so easy to do something Teddy, Lloyd, and Ted. Wasn't possible to break it up. It was weird. It just kind of made the whole thing stop. And it was always like, you know, and the other thing was we had a little building on it. We rented it to a demo company. And we basically were making $3,000 a year and didn't care. You know, I don't need to do anything.
Mhm.
But anyway, we had a wonderful time doing it. And but I did find out that everybody disagrees with everybody, and that slicing a piece up into parcels, unlike the complicated map we made at Land, really worked until you got to a thing like Teddy Lloyd and my property, where we were just didn't know where to draw the line. We didn't know how to. We didn't know if the street was closed or how big would be left. Who, guess what? Where can we draw a line? Let's draw a house. We go to the planning department. They go like, oh no, you can just show us the curb location. And then all of a sudden that guy retires. The next planner shows up 2 years later and says, no, you have to have a design on the site before I'll approve the planning part of it. Where's Teddy? It's Istanbul, last I heard. Anyway, but it was it was impossible. But it didn't hurt. Nobody was getting hurt. We were actually making a little money every year, a little, you know,
Yeah.
and it was ours, and going way up in value, and it did. When I sold it, I think we made $1 million between the three of us.
Mhm.
So it was good. It's a land holding deal, but it's a disappointing story in a lot of ways. I don't know. I don't know. It's a you know, Barrio Logan is the crux of the problem right now that everybody talks about and everybody's most interested in, and nobody understands very well gentrification.
Mhm.
And there's no reason to talk about this on the air. I'm not gonna.
We can wrap up
Okay.
because that can be a really specific conversation, and it's a whole nother can of worms to get into.
Yeah, it's a whole
but I
other
think,
thing.
you know, you covered like a really big chunk of
Okay.
of history and chronology, and that's probably a
I
good
think you
natural
probably
part to
got it at
stop.
this point.
Yeah, I'd love to catch a story specifically about the ins and outs of the Mary Mac building. You know, I like it so much. We spent so much time in it as a studio, and like your design language is expressed so clearly in that building.
Well,
I'd
thank
love,
you, Tyler.
I'd love to get into the nuts and bolts of it sometime specifically, but I feel like we should probably continue with the chronology of
Yeah, I mean, anybody
developing
listening
your
to this
story.
must be worn out, huh? Right? I mean, you know, talking heads like this, you guys. Anyway, I
Yeah.
really appreciated how you put it together last time, you guys. We looked really nice. Kathy and I had a real fun time looking at ourselves.
It was a good stories too. I love
Okay,
those. I love the Del Mar Terrace stories. Those are it's like a whole different era.
Can we
It is a different era. It's a different world. It is
Yeah.
completely. And
Can
these
we-
kids now going to go buy $1 million house in South Park and try to do something. I'm
Well,
going,
yeah, that's it. So
God.
I love the go home stories because there's a couple of things that are so special to me. There's one that is like your story of Via Donata and the development of the go home is like the way housing exists in the rest of the world, and it's sort of the non-financialized housing system, right? Like somebody and their friends and their family get together and they need to solve a housing problem, and they get together and they pull together what little money they have and they build housing out of it, and it's you know, piece by piece and vernacular. And I love that, like in San Diego, vernacular is done by architects. That's one of my favorite things about the character of architecture in San Diego.
Yeah,
And
it
that
is
you guys,
spectacular now.
it is
Isn't it?
absolutely, it is, yeah, absolutely. And I love that it's like, and that's maybe one of the most interesting things to talk about is we're just sort of talking about what happened and the people involved and everything like that. The materials and the approach and the complicated partnerships are all such an important part of housing in San Diego. I love that story. It's like Via Donata is such a perfect example of like housing and architects solving problems for themselves. And I think that what you taught with MRED and what you've taught with teaching, you know, architects to lead their own projects was that, like, hey, you have all of the resources to do this. Like, what can buildings do for you?
Well, Tyler, I was sure fun going out and seeing them buildings that you just made. They
Thanks.
are all so cute. And then they have that future thing happening on the front of them and everything. I just think it's really wonderful. I like the way they sit there together on the hill.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you got all those people together and built it and figured out how to keep them all friends through that process. And I think that it's excellent.
Yeah, it's an accomplishment.
We had a lot of fun doing it. It was our version of the Lind block where nobody would invite us to a competition. There was no way that we would win a competition. And we had little money and very straight, rigid property lines. And you had to stay within your line. And was a recipe for staying friends. You stay on your side of the property, I'll stay on my
that's
side
what
of the
it is.
property.
You draw a line. Draw a line, right? I know. Anyway,
Can we-
I think it's really fun.
If you guys enjoyed that, I'm Pedro Tavares.
And I'm Tyler Hansen.
This is MRED Radio signing off.